All right, welcome back into the podcast, and I am super excited for this episode. We are back in the college basketball atmosphere, and you know what that means. It means I got to bring on my guy Asher Smith. So Asher, how we doing, man? You doing good?
I'm doing excellent. Ready to talk some basketball. It's been way too long. Way too long.
I know. I mean, we had an unbelievable March Madness podcast. It was like right as I was starting the show, I was like, "Ooh, March Madness is happening. We got to cover it." And we did an excellent job covering it. We got the back half of the season, and this is the first time previewing it from the forefront of the season. So I'm excited for this. Um, I so I gave you a lot of questions.
Yes.
We talked about I gave you about 15 questions on what we were thinking was going to happen with the college basketball season. And I want to just go through some of them and see for the audience just to get back in that college basketball mode. So let's talk about it a little bit. I want to start with UConn because UConn was the team that took the league by storm last year and absolutely dominated March Madness and won the championship. And, you know, can they repeat? We don't see a lot of repeats in college basketball. It hasn't happened in a while, actually. So, I mean, who are some of the key players coming back this year, and can UConn do the impossible and repeat?
Yeah, I mean, UConn was definitely someone off of my radar, and I'm sure yours when we were picking, who was our Final Fours were going to be a year ago and got all those wrong. So it's definitely someone that I want to keep my eye on for this season and someone that the listener should definitely look into. So big point of emphasis for this year is going to be coaching turnover. Did you re-sign your coach? Is your coach back? Who did he add on his staff? Second is going to be how many players are we able to retain, right? Like obviously with the transfer portal, you never know if freshmen are sticking around. That's going to be a given. But this is probably the last year of that COVID eligibility that we're going to
Yeah.
see for a while. So you're going to have guys who've played 5-6 years, bringing up the ball. Some of them, should be probably on their fifth year of their rookie contract in the NBA, but it's, they're still in college. So UConn luckily has the benefit of both. So they obviously lost a couple key people, their center to be one. But they're bringing back a good amount. So Tristan Newton, Alex Caravan, and Donovan Clingan, all guys coming back. Tristan Newton, obviously a fifth-year guard, which is going to be insanely valuable for a team that clearly can run an offense valuably through 6 games in order to win it all, right? So you spoke on it. What do you need to repeat, right? We rarely see it in college basketball. We've seen it maybe, twice in 40 years. It's very hard to do. So I'd say that, the key things they need to do is one, bring back their coach, which they did. They signed their coach to an extension. He's going to be there forever. It sounds like he's basically what UConn basketball is. And then adding key freshmen to that. So they got the number 9 recruit overall, Stephen Castle, coming in. That's just valuable points right off, probably not even off the bench, probably in the starting lineup, that adding to an already championship team is going to be pretty invaluable. So they're going to be pretty awesome to watch. I look forward to it. My biggest question mark for them is how can they compete in that Big East, right? Because this is a team that was 4th in the Big East coming into the tournament. Not that that means they're out of it. The Big East is obviously stacked, but that is something to watch for. Like, can they dominate not only in the postseason, but throughout the year? Can they stay healthy? Can they win games on the road? That's something we don't know. So I think that's kind of the next step that UConn needs to take, kind of flirting with that number 1 spot in the Big East. And after that, probably have a clear path to at least have a chance to repeat. We know it won't be easy.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot, like in that Way Too Early podcast. Like the Big East is stacked,
Yeah.
they're loaded, and that's going to make it difficult for UConn, I think. But I really like you bringing the fact out about the coach. Dan Hurley really showed us like what a great coaching job he did with that team. The team was so stacked from around the board, and they were athletic, but also the coaching job there was just fantastic. They were prepared to play each game in March, and I think that was really important. But a guy that you mentioned that I really like is Donovan Clingan, the big guy. He came in March Madness and was sensational. I think he could have a really solid year for UConn. But I mean, I'm excited for UConn overall. Like, they're definitely a really good team, but there's a lot of other good teams that, makes it
Definitely.
difficult to repeat. And that's like basically the story with all these college basketball teams. Like, it's so hard to repeat. I mean, we haven't really seen like a dynasty where like you've seen repeats. I feel like the last time was really the Duke Christian Laettner Like that's the last time we've really seen like a dynasty type way of happening, and then UCLA back in the day and stuff like that. But as March Madness has grown and as these teams have like kind of come in, like it just makes it so difficult to repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only teams that were close were Villanova was
Yep.
twice in 3 years. I think Florida with Billy Donovan was able to
Yep.
repeat.
They were able.
One
Yep.
year that wasn't crazy. Even the Fab Five got there twice and weren't able to win either. Like it's tough to just get back there. So some of the things that you're looking at that they're bringing back, it's like the reason that coaching is big is because, as we talked about on the last pod, like teams with top 10 defenses and top 10 offenses usually get to the Final Four. Like
Yeah.
it's a recipe. You try to pick other ones. You say, how did FAU get here? How did San Diego State get here? Well, they didn't win at all, right? So bringing back a big like Donovan Clingan and bringing back your coach is how you keep a top 10 defense along with a top 10 offense. So that's something they're going to look to do. It's going to be probably pretty impossible in the Big East, but come March, they'd probably be right back where they were.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for them overall. Another team that's near the top that I'm actually very interested in is Purdue. Purdue's bringing back the stud center Zach Edey, who's just a monster and probably could win the Wooden Award again. I mean, he's just the most dominant college basketball player in a while. I mean, he's just an absolute monster. But my question for Purdue is, how do you see them responding to one of the biggest letdowns, losing to the Tobin Anderson, Fairleigh Dickinson team? Talk to me about like what you see them responding with, and will they just be absolutely dominant coming out the gates?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give props to Purdue if you're talking about college basketball ever, but at least in the last 6 years. Like they are, everyone knows who Purdue is. Everyone knows they've got the biggest guy in the country. It doesn't matter what team it was. It could be 5 years ago. You still probably think you're that guy. So the fact that Zach Edey is back, fresh off a winning player of the year, obviously, majority of their team is back too. They're going to be scary. I'd say that if Zach Edey wants to be player of the year next year, he can be player of the year next
Yeah.
year. Like there is no one that can stop that man. And the Big Ten is the most physical conference in basketball. Might, lack certain speed or 3-point shooting compared to other conferences, but that's because they're back in the paint. You have to stop Zach Edey. You have to be physical. So the fact that he could win the Big Ten Player of the Year after, going through a schedule like that is pretty insane. So if he wants to win it again, he will. My challenge for Purdue is that clearly him playing the style of ball that he is not going to win you a national championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might win you the Big Ten again. I imagine that a big reason they will probably win the Big Ten again is because their guards last year were freshmen and they're all coming back, and it's just scary to think about. But you got to think if you're Purdue and if you're Matt Painter, there has to be other ways to get those freshman guards involved besides just throwing it in the paint. Right? Like clearly, throwing the ball into the paint 27 times a game to Zach Edey is not going to get you past a team of all short 3-point shooters that can run on you, right? So I'd say that their challenge this year is to really test that guard play, see if they can maybe play a little outside of that traditional Purdue basketball. Definitely don't go away from what you're good at, but down the season when teams are starting to figure you out, you want to have other tools in your toolkit, and that's something that might take away Zach Edey's Player of the Year, sure, but I'm sure at this point he'd be much happier with a late March run than he would with another Player of the Year trophy. So I think they can do it. I really like their guards. I think that they're, very talented. We said it last year, even when people were doubting on it. Like they can handle the ball, they can shoot the rock. Like it's definitely something they can do. I just don't know how they work with Zach Edey to kind of elevate his game to help everyone else on the floor, because clearly that's what's lacking. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like to add on to that, we talked about it a lot during the March Madness podcast. These guards are young. They were young. Like Braden Smith, true freshman, Fletcher Lawyer, true freshman, like that it was difficult for them. And you kind of saw it in that March Madness moment more with Braden Smith. I actually was very impressed with how Fletcher played in that game. And that's part of the reason I'm pretty high on Fletcher taking that step up this year. I think you can see a lot more creation from both of them. Like, I think Braden Smith saw his performance in that Fairleigh Dickinson game and was like, that's not me. I really think both of them are going to take huge steps up, and we're going to see Purdue out the gates looking like a crazy team, a crazy, scary team. And I think what you said really hits a home. Like, they're just going to have to show that they can play different styles. And I think if the guards can elevate their pick and roll play or their creation and the one-on-one, it's going to be so much easier to create offense besides Edey. And to be honest with you, like, the teams that have a big that they can rely on, they also need to be able to play without that big. You know, you see a lot of teams struggle with that. They have this great big guy, but the problem is if he's in foul trouble, what do you do? You know, like it makes it difficult, you know, and I could see like if Edie has one injury, they just sit him and let the guards play, you know, and stuff like that. Or
Yeah.
even like start the game with Edie playing for the first before the first media, and then have your guards play until the 8 minute mark and have Edie come back then. You know, like stuff like that, maybe limiting his minutes a little bit might help their development throughout the regular season. So then you're looking more for that tournament because I feel like Purdue is going to have that Virginia edge that Virginia had when it happened to them. Um, I mean, it's just scary when one seeds that lost to a 16 seed have their whole team coming back. You know, that's just a scary thought to have. So I'm very interested in Purdue here. Do you have anything else before we can move on?
No, I'd say it's a great point. We've seen what happens after teams lose to a 16 seed. It's usually pretty good the next year. So you're right. They're bringing everyone back. I'd say the one thing is that Purdue, being elevated to a national powerhouse the last 5 years, like they're going to play a pretty tough out of season schedule, probably out of conference
Mm-hmm.
schedule. I would look to test those other players during that time because obviously you're going to need Zach Edey if you want to win the Big Ten. Like that's not a secret. You're going to need him, but you probably don't need him to start the year, right? Like the reason that teams like Michigan State and Kansas can take a couple losses before they go into the conference play is because they know that makes them better, right?
Yeah.
That's when I would start using other people because last year Purdue probably started 10, 15-0, right? And because no one knew
Mm-hmm.
how to stop Zach Edey, and whether they figured it out or not, clearly that wore out at the end of the year. So I would test other people early, like you said, kind of keep them hidden, start showing some other stuff, and then once that Big Ten season rolls around, like go get right back into it so you're ready to go.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Staying in the Big Ten, I want to talk about Michigan State, okay? Because a lot of people are very high on the Spartans this year. They brought in a really good recruiting class. I mean, I was watching a lot of these videos of their Midnight Madness, and first of all, Izzo was dressed as Batman, which kind of made no sense to me, but I mean, it was kind of funny. Um, but this Cohen Carr guy, he is an unbelievable athlete, and I'm really excited to see him play along with all of the people that they got coming back. They got Joey Hauser coming back, Tracy Walker, you know, like it's the same Michigan State team that we know and love, and they're bringing in more freshman talent. So talk to me a little bit about what your expectations are for Michigan State this year.
Yeah, I think my expectations for them should be the same as their expectations, right? You got to win it all this year.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, winning the Big Ten is something that should be part of that goal. I think the Big Ten is going to be tough as ever, and they're going to compete for it. And whether they remain healthy is fine, but they have to be like ready for March, right? Like this team is built for a championship. The fact that you brought up Cohen Carr is perfect, right? Like that guy is high flying, one of the most ridiculous athletes I've ever seen. He's
Yeah.
probably like the 10th, 11th man on this team this year. Like, no offense to him, but like that's how deep they are, right? He's the fourth best freshman they're bringing in, I think. So that shows you how just insane this roster is that they've got guys back for their 6th year, for their 5th year, guys who played with Michigan State for, good years and bad. This is the year they got to do it for sure. And I think that they added the right group, they added the right position groups, they kept people that were quality people in the tournament, as we saw with their two guards coming back. Like they were just lights out in the tournament that no one really thought they would be. So
Yeah.
they got all the pieces. I'd say that obviously this should be Final Four or bust, championship or bust. Like it's getting to the point. And obviously, I'm more rich into Big Ten and Michigan history, but does Izzo need that second ring to be in that elite group? Right? Like it's crazy to think about because he has
Yeah.
more Final Fours than 99% of colleges out there, some
Yeah.
combined. Right? Like it's ridiculous, but he's got one championship in 30 years, and that came in the year 2000. Right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, that COVID year was tough. That was another one like this where he was building for something that didn't get to happen, but this might be it. Like he's got to really put all his chips in for this year and kind of show that, yeah, he's still that guy because the fact that they've kept him around this long, he's beaten everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time for him to get a second ring. Pressure's on. I want to see him with his back to the wall. It'll be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned these two teams in the Big Ten because it kind of seems like a two-man race. It really does. Like Michigan State and Purdue seem like on a different level than the other teams in the Big Ten. And it's mostly because these two teams are clearly top five teams in the country. Like clearly. These
Clearly.
like I mean, Zach Edey, unbelievable. We talked about it earlier. And then Michigan State's bringing back their whole team with a stacked freshman class. It just makes it so difficult to, like pick against them in anything almost. And if you had to give the edge to one of these teams, who do you like a little more going into the season?
Yeah, I don't think he'll waver from my opinion in March. I think I give the edge to the Big Ten season to Purdue, and the edge to the big NCAA tournament to Michigan State. Like,
Fair, yeah.
Purdue has all the pieces. They're all coming back. They know how to win a Big Ten, and they're probably going to do it again. Michigan State, every single year, that team is ready to make a run. I had them going
Mm-hmm.
even farther than they went last year, and that was above expectation. So, come back to me middle of the season. Maybe we'll see Michigan State taking an early step up. Like, these seniors obviously are ready to go. They want to get every single win they can. But yeah, I would say that end of the day, team to make a 6-game run on the line, I would probably take Michigan State at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that more because, like, you talked about it with Purdue, as their weakness was having Edie like move around, small teams. And with State, we don't really know what their weakness is going to be yet because we haven't seen them as much on the floor.
Yeah.
But I
No,
mean, for
MSU is going to start a center who's going to play 11 minutes a game and foul out.
exactly,
Like, they just have every single
yeah.
tool you could ask for as a coach. They probably go 13 deep this year. It's an insane roster.
Yeah, I mean, insane roster, and I really feel like they can play in so many different ways. Like, you could play Hauser at the 5 and be okay.
Absolutely.
Like being able to spread teams out in that way where everybody on the floor can shoot, or being able to play a traditional big is going to be really difficult to handle. It just
Yep.
is. And
Yeah, and maybe Booker comes in and all of a sudden he's Jaren Jackson again, and he's playing any
exactly.
position you want him to. So it's scary for sure.
Yeah, I mean, State just has the versatility to make it really scary. And it's not a knock on Purdue at all because we said they're a top 5 team. But, like, just looking at these two teams, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, in the Big Ten. And like I was saying, pretty much just a 2-man race over there. Going into the last Big Ten team I want to talk about is Michigan. Okay, we got to discuss Michigan. What are your expectations as a former Michigan student manager and a big Michigan fan? Talk to me about your expectations for this basketball season.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it brief because the listeners probably want me to about Michigan. It could go on forever. No, I mean, big year for the fan base, right? Like, missing the tournament last year, the only expectation this year was to make the tournament, right? Like,
Yep.
you realize how much it means to you when it's gone, Like, we probably played the same year 2 years in a row, and 1 year we made it, 1 year we didn't. The year we made it was a complete win for me, right? So it's all about making that tournament. I think we definitely have the pieces to do it. The middle of the Big Ten is down. The top of the Big Ten is up. We'll probably take our licks there. I would say the challenge probably is like, is this a turning point for the program, right? Like, which way are we turning? You have a coach that's had NBA interest in the past. Now no one even knows if he's going to stay at Michigan for that much longer. Does he even, like this NIL era of recruiting? He's been able to seemingly do it, but then hasn't turned the results, So we'll see. Like, this is kind of like, which direction does the program take? Do they develop the guys that they have, or do they abandon ship and go transfer portal? Because they definitely tried to this last offseason. It didn't really work out for them. So we'll see. I mean, it's nice that it's Coach Howard's, his first class. It's their last year there. It's guys that he recruited that he knows. He's bringing in some good transfers. They'll be able to handle themselves if they don't get injured. It's all about making the tournament. I think they'll do it. I think that my expectation is around the same, aiming for like 16, 17 wins and sneaking in as like a 8 or 9 seed and be dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, and we talked about it a little bit with the Big Ten. Like, there's two big teams at the top, and then the rest are like kind of in that even tier where there's not like a crazy team near their level. It's more like just kind of stacked in the middle. And I think that could really be beneficial for Michigan as like they begin the season, some growing pains and stuff, and figuring some stuff out. It could be beneficial starting to play your best basketball near the Big Ten schedule. So I think it's more wait and see. I like what you're saying about his Jawan's first recruiting class. That's definitely going to help, I think, because they know the system. Like, the system has been in play. So I think we'll see some of what Jawan wants to see on the court. So I'm excited for that aspect, and we'll see. We'll see. I think it's a very much we'll see, and you're just looking for any type of improvement from last year, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you got to address Hunter Dickinson probably as the next step to go because he is no longer part of Michigan. But
Yeah.
to end on the Michigan point, where do you go from there, right? I'd say that the one shining point that people might not know is Namari Burnett coming from Alabama, somebody that's been able to shoot the rock pretty well. He had a pretty high recruiting ranking, so the fact that he's still in college might surprise some people. But he was part of Juwan's first recruiting class. Like when I was in the gym, I remember walking through, and Juwan was super high. He wanted him so badly. And the fact that they were able to now get him through the transfer portal is kind of the good part about this whole thing, right? They're able to stick around with guys that you maybe lost out on in the initial recruiting process and then bring them back later. So obviously, sucks to lose Hunter, but maybe in a Purdue type lens, that's good for us because we were playing through him too many times, right? Maybe it gets other people the ball and we're adding good pieces. And yeah, I'm excited to see him play.
For sure, for sure. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll get back to more questions in a second.
Hello, hello. This is Giovanni Mosheri. You might have heard me a couple times on Jake's Takes. I am the sports media director of Oakland University's campus radio station, WXOU, and I've been the host for about 2 years of a weekly sports show called The Jomo Show, where we cover all of Oakland University athletics, including a weekly update on scores and highlights, as well as interviews with athletes or those otherwise involved in athletics. You can listen to The Jomo Show live on WXOU Thursdays at 6, or you can tune in to me afterwards on Spotify. It's The Jomo Show.
All right, welcome back into the show. And Asher, we left off on the Big Ten, so I want to switch topics and I want to know who are two teams that you think are being a little overlooked going into this season?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. I'd say number one on my list is Baylor. I think
Okay.
they are getting overlooked in a drastic way this year. Obviously, last year's result probably main driver of that. It's hard to come off a national championship and have a better second year, right? But no, I mean, Houston's coming into the Big 12. A lot of people are thinking that they're going to run the table next to Kansas, and Baylor's kind of taking a back seat to those teams. They're getting kind of put with that middle tier. And obviously, there's a lot of exciting stories to talk about in college basketball, and Baylor might be one of them. But they've got every single piece I'm looking for, to win a national championship again. They've got obviously one of the greatest coaches in today's game with Scott Drew. They've got a top 12 recruiting class, which is something that, adding to that already talented roster, replacing a lot of talented people is needed. And then they're going to be number 7 on the KenPom rankings coming in this year. So, they've got every asset needed to go on a crazy run and shock Kansas, shock Houston, win the Big 12 again, win the whole thing. But I'm just not seeing much chatter about the Baylor Bears. And I would, put my money on a couple big games, maybe not going their way early, kind of some learning points of the season like they had last year. But come tournament, I see no reason why this team shouldn't have a top 4 seed, right? And those are the type of teams that are going to get a lot of national attraction in March. And that's probably what Baylor wants, right? They don't want to be top of mind in coming in November, right? That's when you take your losses, right? They want to kind of build, and that's what Scott Drew has kind of instilled there. So I don't know. Baylor's probably number 1 on my list. Just going to keep an eye on them. Number 2 would be the Oregon Ducks. They're a team that I'm really excited to watch. Yeah. So again, kind of similar thing. The Pac-12, a lot of great stories this year with the Pac-12, right? Last year, the conference potentially. You got USC's loaded class this year.
Yeah.
UCLA has been knocking on the door for the last 3 years. You got Arizona, right? A bunch of teams that are kind of national brands now in college basketball. At least, in March, you see a lot of people picking them to win it all type thing. And Oregon doesn't really get that same love, right? Which is crazy because they've had some of the same success that the Pac-12 teams have enjoyed throughout the last 5-10 years, right? It's not like we've seen a national championship, rip out of the Pac-12 except for maybe once, right, in the last couple of years. So, I really like Oregon. Again, top 15 class. They're top 50 KenPom, so obviously they got to prove themselves on defense as always. But again, great coaching, bringing in talented players, overlooked. I love those teams. I love teams that are overlooked to start the year, coming in hot, will surprise some teams. Hard to win in their home gym, almost impossible to win in their home gym. Those are the teams that I back my buck on. So those are kind of the top teams that I'm looking to maybe emerge from from just below that elite class into the elite class come March when they're top 5 seeds, right? The last team on my list I'm looking at, quick shout out back to the Big Ten, is Penn State. I think that they're going to be an electric team this year. What I mean by that is they're probably going to be a 7 seed, and they're probably going to surprise a lot of people. But they've got, obviously, a new head coach coming in from VCU. VCU is bringing all their players with them over to Penn State, right?
That's awesome.
A-10 player of the year. they're going to be a lot of fun to watch, right? How do they figure out the Big Ten? Do they change anything? Do they keep the same offense? What's it going to be like? And yeah, I really like the way that they play. I love Ace Bailey. He's just an electric point guard. Like, he's awesome. And yeah, so we'll see. But those are kind of three teams that I'm looking for to maybe surprise some people out the gate.
Yeah, I like those teams. I mean, you talked about Baylor in the Big 12. Like, the Big 12 is just absolutely stacked this year. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned it, Houston coming into the conference. Like, geez, I mean, it's crazy over there, the Big 12. And I really think Baylor is a team that does get overlooked. I mean, you got Kansas, who's flat out crazy, and we'll get to some of the top dogs, but they brought in Hunter Dickinson. Like, they're the number one in the country to start the year. They're unbelievable. I mean, and Baylor just doesn't really get talked about. Like, Scott Drew just does, he brings in talent every year. And I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about them winning the championship, with that Davion Mitchell year and all those guys that they had. They always bring the athleticism, the defense. I mean, they're always just a very, very tough team. And again, they're in a very tough conference, but Scott Drew really likes to build that team. And I really like that Baylor team. Oregon and the Pac-12, like, the Pac-12 is pretty stacked again.
Yeah.
UCLA always brings in those guys, and they have a team. And then USC, they might be getting a little overhyped with the Bronny James and all that stuff.
They could
But
be.
I mean, I think they're pretty good this year. And with Oregon, like, I like that they normally bring in athletic guys. We'll see. We'll see. A lot of the Pac-12 for me is we'll see. I don't really get much time to watch them, to be honest, just because they're on the West Coast. I kind of wish I lived in the West Coast or Central Time Zone or something like that, just to get the best middle. But you don't get to see much of them. One of the teams that I'm looking at that I like is Gonzaga. I really like Gonzaga. They brought in Nemhard from where was it?
From Creighton. Yeah.
Creighton. And I loved Nemhard last year. Like, that guy is an unbelievable point guard. And Gonzaga's just, they always bring in these guys. And Drew Timmy's still there. He's still there.
I can't believe
they have Strother as well, who was really good last year. I mean, I really like this team. They always bring in guys that are just so tough. And I love how well coached they are. I mean, they're always, Mark Few does a fantastic job there, and I really think they're going to be scary. They actually play Purdue early in the year, and I'm really excited for that one, November 20th, and that one's going to be really fun. And they got an interesting schedule too. They also play USC, which will be a cool game. They also play San Diego State and UConn. So, I mean, like, you see a lot of these games where it's going to be very interesting to see, like, the talent. And that's the one part I love about out of conference is the teams, like, they schedule each other every single time. You see, like, tough games on their schedule, and that's one thing in college basketball that I like a little more than college football, because football they schedule way in advance, and it's like, it makes it tough to schedule well. But
Right.
I'm excited for Gonzaga this year, and I'm looking forward to it. What do you have any thoughts on Gonzaga before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, they were going to be one of my potential juggernauts for this year.
Okay.
So I'm glad you picked them, because I think that they are definitely where they want to be, where they are talked about as a perennial college basketball talent, but someone
Yeah.
has to prove themselves, right? Like, they kind of been in the spotlight a little too much in the last 3 years, right? The expectations have been way too high.
Yeah.
They're talking about joining the Big 12, they're talking about doing all this. Like, they're kind of right back where they want to be, right? Competing with everybody, scheduling tough games. They might win, they might lose, but come March, 1 seed, right, rolling into it. It's gonna be an awesome year for Gonzaga. I think everything's playing back into their favor, and I can't believe Drew Timmy's back. It's gonna be fun to watch.
I know, it's crazy. That kind of leads into my juggernaut question. Who are some of your other juggernauts? I talked about one of them, but talk to me about maybe one or two, and we can go back and forth on it.
Yeah, so we mentioned, probably the top dogs being Purdue and UConn. So I'll probably leave them out of the spotlight, but they're definitely on my list of who's going to be the 1 seed coming in this year, right? Those two. I'd say my other two would be Marquette and Duke.
Okay.
Duke, obviously, just signing Shire for a 5-6 year extension, bringing in 3 of the top 12 guys again, like they're loaded. You know, you saw what he did with insane freshman talent last year. Took him a little bit to get going. Now he's kind of got his shoes underneath him. He's going to know where to put people on the floor against some of these crazier ACC teams like Virginia Tech, Wake Forest, these, you know, wild atmospheres. Like, he's going to know. So I think that Duke is going to probably rise back up. UNC is going to be a little down again. Like, you know, all that stuff's working back in Duke's favor. So we'll see. They're going to have a probably brutal start to the year, you know, schedule-wise again. So maybe they shock the world right at the beginning and start at the number one overall spot. But yeah, I'd say end of the year, I like Duke coming out of it. And then Marquette would be my other one. Marquette is someone that didn't fall under the radar at all, right? They won the Big East. They definitely had high expectations, but they kind of fell on those, right? They're one of the teams that got upset this year. And that sometimes, you know, lights a fire on them, just like Purdue. Like, that's something that maybe you want to come back and prove. Everyone's talking about UConn all of a sudden, right? Like, UConn finished fourth in the Big East. Like, Marquette probably thinks they're nothing, you know?
Yeah.
So you kind of want to prove yourself again. So they're bringing back the Big East Player of the Year. Their Shaka Smart's going to be there a while. Like, they got all the pieces. I'm excited to see Marquette. So that kind of rounds out my top four, excluding Kansas, because, you know, a little bitter about Hunter Dickinson. I think they're a soft five, but yeah, that kind of rounds out my juggernaut.
Yeah, to add on about Marquette, like, I'm looking at their schedule right now, and they got a pretty interesting schedule. They play UCLA, which I think is a cool game. They play at Illinois, which will be pretty solid. They play at Wisconsin. They play home against Marquette or Texas. They play home against Texas, and then they start their Big East games. And the Big East, man, like, it's really interesting because, like you were saying with UConn, like, they probably don't think they're anything because they beat them in the regular season. And that was the thing. Like, UConn's only losses came to Big East teams. Like, the Big East had their way with UConn. So I actually think it'll be kind of interesting to see UConn, after they play out of conference games, go into the Big East and see if the Big East can expose something for the rest of the country to see, you know, because I don't think last year many people expected the champion to come out of the Big East. So I don't think people were too locked in on what the Big East was doing to expose a team like UConn or something like that. So I would actually be really interested to see their first game. They play at Providence in the Big East, and Providence could be a solid team. They lost their coach, right? I think
Yeah,
they
he's
did.
at Georgetown now.
Georgetown now. Yeah. So, I mean, like, interesting to see there, but I mean, right away they play Creighton, like, right away. So I mean, that's another great game there. And with Marquette, like, you have Kolek back, you have Cam Jones, I think it is, as Cam Jones, as their leading scorer back. So, like, there's a lot of guys back, and, you know, we'll see. I'm very excited to see how Marquette comes on this year, and then Duke, like, Duke's Duke, man. They're starting out number 2 in the country, and they always have this recruiting class that is just unbelievable, and they always play a crazy schedule, an absolutely insane schedule. Like, they play, I'm just going to list some of the games. All right, you ready for this? They play home against Arizona, at Michigan State, at Arkansas, and then that's November. December, they play home against Baylor, and all right, it's not as bad as it normally is, but that's a really good schedule there.
Brutal
schedule. Yes.
Brutal first four. So
brutal schedule.
Again, maybe they come out of that as number one. Maybe they don't want to, but at least they can find out who they are early and, you know, adjust from there. So I expect big things from Duke. Honestly, any year for Duke is a letdown if they don't make that Final Four, right? So pressure's back on, as it should be. John Travis good coach.
Yeah, I mean, and they got a lot of guys back too, like Flipikowski, who I loved. Like, I was very high on Duke going into the tournament because I loved some of the guys they had. And Tyson Proctor, man, is a really good basketball player. A lot of people like him as an NBA draft kind of guy. So, I mean, I'm very excited to watch him play. And that Dariq Whitehead was supposed to be like one of these top recruits. So he's coming back too. So I think, like, he'll be ready to show people wrong. And they got Roach back, and Roach got injured last year. So, I mean, they're going to really be talented this year and tough to deal with. Number 2 in the country right now. I mean, overall, I agree with those juggernauts, you know, going into it. I also think, and I didn't mention this in the sleepers, but I also think Arkansas is a team to look out for too. I mean, Musselman did an outstanding job with them last year, and losing a lot of guys. They lost Ricky Council, they lost Anthony Black, you know, a lot of NBA talent. They also lost Jordan Walsh, But I mean, they're still a very solid team. You know, they'll be
Yep.
back and hungry and ready to go. I'm excited to see, like, I love the way they play defense. So I'm really excited to see how that's gonna happen for them. And the SEC, like, Alabama lost a lot of pieces. You know, a lot of teams lost a lot. So we'll see if the SEC is gonna be at the same level as they were last year. But Arkansas, to me, maybe not a juggernaut, but a team to look out for to going into this season. You know,
Totally agree with that take. Yeah, Arkansas is always on the list of sleepers. Not even a sleeper at this point anymore, right? They're going to mess things up for some big teams, and they're going to look good in March. So, love what their coach is doing. It's a lot of talent to replace. I will say he's got his task, out ahead of him because Anthony Black was a damn good player. The fact that they're losing like NBA talent year in after year,
yeah,
it's tough for a coach. So we'll see, but I like them a lot.
yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so I wanted to ask you about, and this will be the last question here, but I wanted to ask you about Florida Atlantic and San Diego State. Okay, I wanted to get to these two teams because it was very interesting to watch them dominate the tournament they did, make the Final Four, and shock the world getting there. So, talk to me a little bit about what you expect from both of these teams. I think Florida Atlantic sitting at number 10 in the country, and San Diego State sitting at number 17 in the country. So, talk to me about what you think both of these teams will do going into this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you've listened to this podcast up to this point, like they've followed the method for staying consistent year in, year out, especially after a year of success, right? You held on
Yeah.
to your coaches, you held on to your key players, you're using your COVID years to your advantage, and you're bringing in top classes, right? Clearly, these guys are benefiting from winning last year. Like, that is why, as a program, it is so important to win in March because, like UConn, all of a sudden bringing in a top 4 recruiting class, right? Like, it pays dividends to win in March, clearly. But these guys did it right with the coaches. The fact that they're both back is something that, should be rewarded for them, at least in their careers, because they
Yeah.
could have definitely taken higher paying jobs, probably at universities that don't even have a shot at basketball, right? Just because they were that successful. So really, really
Especially
good
Dusty
for them.
May. Especially Dusty
Especially,
May.
yeah. The coach out of Florida, young coach out of Florida can recruit. Like, that is invaluable at an SEC, ACC school. So
Mm-hmm.
number one, love that they're back. And don't even care who they roll out on the court at that point. You can clearly get back to where you were because those coaches are outstanding. Second, I think that the nation's kind of giving them, their flowers, right? Like top 10 in the country, that's incredible, right? Like sometimes you see people, especially in football, go back to the exact same preseason rankings as last year. Like, oh, we don't really care like what you did, last year. Like, we're going to go back to the brands, the national brands. Nope. They said like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we recognize what you're doing. Ken Palm's got both those teams top 40, San Diego State top 30. He'll probably have the best defense in the country again, right? So like people understand now what to look for in terms of those two teams. How they're going to do during the year, it's kind of like you were saying with Oregon, with some of the other teams that maybe they don't get the national TV coverage that they should be getting, right?
Yeah.
The San Diego State in Pacific time, Florida Atlantic in a weaker conference. It's going to be tough. They're going to have to be fighting. They're kind of going to have to take on like a Gonzaga level schedule to kind of get up, in people's attention. But that, always can work in their favor, right? Like they just have to work on doing what they do best, even if it's not flashy, getting to that same point they were. They'll probably get the benefit of the doubt and get a better seed even, right? And after that, like who knows? Anything can happen. So would love to hear your thoughts on them, but I am definitely excited to watch them this year because I thought they did everything in an off season that you possibly could for a team that had that much success.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of nailed both points on the head there. With FAU, like I'm looking at their schedule right now, they got their difficult games at Butler, I think is an interesting game, and they also play at Loyola Chicago to start, which another interesting game. They play at Illinois too, and they also have a home game against Arizona. So, I mean, that's a great game to pull off, especially like the fact of the matter is FAU is not a big time college basketball program. And now we have to talk about them like that because of what they did last year. It was unbelievable what they did last year. They deserve as much credit in the world as you can, because that is just great. And that's why the respect on their names at number 10 is awesome. It's flat out awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Dusty May does this season and how he uses guys and how he prepares them for March, because I'm sure he thinks that he has the talent to get them back there. So I love some of the stuff that he did last year in the tournament and the ways that he put guys in the right positions. So I'm interested to see how he's going to do that out of conference, especially like with a game against Loyola Chicago, a game against Arizona, Illinois. Those are going to be good tests for them to start out the year. And then looking at San Diego State, they got my guy back with Micah Parrish, which I'm very thrilled to have that. But they're always going to have the defense, man. They're always going to have the defense. They really do a great job there, and they play a difficult out of conference schedule too. They got St. Mary's at home in November, which will be very interesting. They play at BYU. They also play Gonzaga as well. So I mean, they got a couple games to really like test themselves and get in the right nature before Mountain West play. And with the Mountain West, we'll see. Sometimes there's teams that can shock you and be way better than expected. There's looking at their schedule, there's no other teams that are in the top 25, but Boise State always has tough teams, and I think that would be a team to look out for in conference for San Diego State to see if they can like improve on themselves. But overall, San Diego State's going to be a very interesting team to watch. I love their coach Dutcher. He's been there for a while, and really cool that he's sticking around and getting them to the national championship game. Unbelievable. So I really think both these teams were great stories last year, but they're trying to not end up being stories. They're trying to make this a national thing and make it like a reoccurring thing. So I'm excited for both these teams coming into the year. And I love how we're already started with FAU in the top 10. That's awesome. That's flat out awesome. And college basketball is back, man. I'm pumped. I am pumped.
Same here, man. Yeah, last point on that. It's, a lot of these coaches, they all preach about leaving the place better than you found it, right? Obviously, you want to retire at the place you win championships. Like, that's the goal of any coach, of any team. Want to win a championship, want to be remembered for that. But there's probably never a point in college basketball where you can inherit a program and leave it at a better spot than it is right now. Right? Like San Diego State, you're auditioning for a Pac-12 brand name the entire year. Right?
Yeah.
You might be in the Big 12 in 2 years for all we know. FAU, you could be an ACC team, right? No one knows where they're going to be in the next 5 years. If you're these coaches and you really are doing the right things, implementing the right qualities for your program, it might result in a Power 5 contract, right? Look at UCF, look at Houston. Those coaches are smiling, right?
It's true.
Because they took on those teams at low conferences and elevated them to the Power 5. So I would say that's more alive than ever. We're going to have a great college basketball season. And yeah, I'm excited, really excited. I'm glad we're talking about it already.
Yeah, last question just to end it off, but like, what team are you most excited to watch? We're talking about how excited we are for this season, but there's got to be a team that you're just itching to, watch for this year.
Yeah, the listeners are going to groan because I think they heard me talk about this team for an hour on the selection show, but the Indiana Hoosiers
are
someone I am so excited to watch. The fact that they can flip a Duke recruit in Mbako to come join an already loaded class, one of the best transfer classes with Mike Woodson, an NBA level head coach, like, come on. It's enough of Purdue. They're sick of hearing about Purdue. Indiana runs that state. It's time for them to get back. Never a better time. Their boosters are all in on basketball. Clearly, their football team stinks. I'm so excited for Indiana.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think I'm most excited for Michigan State this year. I think I'm really excited to see if they're just that team, because it seems like that they got the swagger and that they think that they're that team. So I'm looking forward to seeing them this year. More just the in-state thing,
Yep.
I really I used to be a Michigan fan, basketball. These past few years, it just hasn't been the same. It really hasn't. I will always be a Michigan football fan. I'll say that. I don't care about the Spygate or whatever's going on. Yeah, I don't care about that stuff. I will always be there. But I am interested to see Michigan State basketball. I think, dude, college basketball is right around the corner, and I am absolutely pumped for it. Asher, thank you for joining the show. This was a lot of fun, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me on, as always.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we will catch you guys later. See ya. Peace.